All Age Media is proud to present The Week Before, a show that encourages discussion, knowledge, and a bit of banter in between. Now presenting Jamie Dyer with this week's special guest.
My guest today is Thom Bee. Hello, how are you?
I'm not too shabby. Not too shabby at all.
And you are as my records indicate, a circus teacher in Berlin right now.
Yes.
Where are you from originally?
I am from Manchester, and according to the Germans, I'm about as English as someone who's just taken a swim in tea while reading Shakespeare. So I've never felt more English than when I've been here.
Oh, well, there you are. And obviously on the side as well, I might add, you also do a podcast. What's the podcast name?
The podcast is It's Science, Bitch, a comedy science podcast, which tends to be more pop culture than podcast.
Well, you know, that's sometimes the best way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we like it. We talk about what we know. We all love science, but we like science fiction a hell of a lot more. So
don't worry, I'm the same. You know, I'm not that familiar with actual science. It's more what you see on television or hear on the radio. Personally,
yeah. Well, we always joke that the only science I actually know is stuff that I learned from Star Trek. I've actually learned more science over the past 6 months because Wednesday is our 6-month anniversary. I have learned more science over the last 6 months than I did in years of school, and mostly it's through pub conversations as well. It's nice. It's nice to feel educated. I'm definitely the stupid one of the podcast, but that means when the audience is in. It's nice.
Yeah, well, everyone learns in their own way, don't they?
Oh, you can hear me learning if you listen to the show.
Yeah, well, I definitely recommend listening to that. I have listened and I have laughed out loud. So
yes.
That's very good. Yes, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, obviously. And as many regular listeners to the show will know, this is a free round podcast, as in there are 3 rounds here. Quite simply, first round here is the discussion round. Using round an awful lot, but never mind. And today's subject is the subject that apparently you are very familiar with, the subject of space. Are we getting a little bit overboard with going into space? So, because obviously recently the whole Virgin thing, wanting to take tourists into space. I mean, would you personally want to go into space as a tourist?
Yes.
Yes? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have asked that.
I wouldn't want. I don't know. Like, seeing the Earth, that sounds pretty grand to me. But I'd then want to go further. Space tourism for me is something for when we get warp drive and stuff.
I suppose, yeah. Well, because I believe, I don't know, but I believe it takes about 5 days to get to the moon or something.
Yeah, round about. And according to the New Horizons project, which is the probe which is currently on its way to Pluto. 6 years to get to Pluto. No, not 6 years. My lord, 9 years. They launched it in 2006, and it will arrive to get its readings in 2015. It's crazy. Well, space is massive. Space is enormous. If you shrank down the sun to the size of a ballpoint pen, well, the tip of a ballpoint pen. Yes. It wouldn't be elongated. That'd be weird. Then our closest star would still be 9 miles away.
I didn't know that. Spot the space geek.
Yes, very much so. Just it all comes from research for the podcast. I don't know anything about this. I must find all the facts. Matt doesn't make notes. I make thousands of notes so that I can just hold my own, and I somehow host that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what you're into, and obviously, I think, actually, I know you're a big fan of science fiction. I actually think that science fiction has kind of made us a little bit big-headed when it comes to space, because obviously, they tell us of stars and going up into space and living on the moon. I mean, I've heard there is a really old radio serial from like the 1950s, which talked about going on the moon and aliens on the moon and whatnot, and it was this huge hit. And I think obviously they've made us a bit selfish, and that we because we really want to go into space, don't we, really?
Oh, very much so. I mean, the first ever science fiction film, Little Silent short from the 1920s by George Méliès, was about the voyage to the moon. It's the one where the famous rocket in the eye of the moon comes from. And
That's right, yeah.
fight aliens with umbrellas. It's wonderfully British by a French director.
Yeah, don't you find that though? I mean, you're in Berlin, right? I mean, surely you've done things which are uniquely British in Germany.
I apologize for being British all the time. I think that's the most British thing I do here. just walk around, bump into someone, accidentally apologize in English, and then go, "Oh, Entschuldigung, ich bin English," and it's the most British thing. I say crikey a lot, which I never said at home, and I just bumble about here like a hairier Hugh Grant. It's weird.
Well, I guess Wallace and Gromit are, popular in Germany. They also went to the moon, which is apparently made of cheese, but never mind.
And if we're going by pop culture, Flanders lived there too.
Ah, yes. Yeah, well, no, that wasn't really the moon, though, was it? That was more of, that was a planet next to the moon, wasn't it?
Really? Oh, I haven't. It's been a long time. Either way, there's soup dragons in space. That's all I know, and I choose to believe that until it's proven wrong.
Yeah, I guess so. They're bringing back the clangers, aren't they?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
they
could
are.
be dreadful or brilliant all at the same time.
Did I read? I read somewhere that Michael Palin was going to be the voice, which could be awful. Yeah, I can feel it from here, all the way from Berlin. Never mind.
It's just an overwhelming sense of ambivalence. I don't know how I feel about it.
No, and I guess that's, is that towards the characters, or is that just the representation of the moon?
Probably the characters. I mean, it's the same way that they did the CGI Magic Roundabout. They CGI'd Captain Scarlet, and that was terrible. Just so many horrible. It doesn't ruin the originals. I mean, we don't have to watch it, but we do because we're morbidly curious.
Yeah, we're always curious about when they remake things. I mean, I don't know about you, but I love those old space sci-fi movies from like the 50s and 60s. I love the kind of the positive message that it gives of us going into... Yeah.
Just the optimism of it. It's just that wonderful, just like we can do this and we will. Because of course that was before we had been to the moon.
I mean, I saw this absolutely delightful children's series from what, 1960, where in the first series they went to the moon, in the second series they went to Mars, and in the third series they went to Venus, where apparently there are dinosaurs living on the moon with cavemen.
Well, the atmosphere is so thick, we'll never know.
Well, yeah, living on Venus, sorry, with cavemen. It was crazy. Never mind.
I wanna see that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, the Pathfinders in Space or something it's called. It's amazing. It's one of those things where if you notice old sort of science fiction, it's more based on words rather than action.
Yes.
Yeah, they spend more time explaining what they're going to do rather than doing it.
Budgets. Wonderful things.
Well, yeah, considering it was made for the ITV network, very, very small budgets. I saw a science fiction movie once where they were on Venus or somewhere, and they had no source of water, and suddenly it started snowing. Yes,
Sure, that would be sulfur snow. That's not good for anyone.
would have thought. Well, I suppose, but it's just weird to me because it's like are any of these things based on fact, or is it just at all? I mean, actually, you're probably the best person to ask.
Oh, it's full-blown optimism. Venus's core temperature is actually not that hot. It's a lot cooler than a lot of the other planets, but its atmospheric temperature is scalding because its atmosphere is made completely of incredibly thick gases, mostly sulfur. But they believe that Venus used to be like a utopia, like it was very similar to Earth and tropical paradises everywhere. And then the sulfur came, and it just mass volcanic eruptions. And it all went a bit Pete Tong, really.
And does that damage the surface, or does that just sink in, or the volcanic eruptions?
I'm not entirely sure myself. I know that we don't have much of an idea of what is really on the surface there because because the clouds are so thick. It's all done through infrared and different spectrum cameras. That's really hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it always amazes me, but when they send up these probes, I mean, how I mean, I'm not really much of a technology geek when it comes to space gadgets, but is there just a giant sat nav or something that just takes it that way? How does it know where to go?
Well, it's got its flight trajectory, which is sent from base command, but the way that a lot of probes, especially the ones that are going further out, do is that they use the gravity of other planets to propel them as well. So, for example, going back to New Horizons, the Pluto probe, that's been asleep for 8 years, I believe. It's just been dormant, otherwise it would burn out its fuel before it got there.
Yeah.
And it's just had enough to track it and propel it a little bit, like going on full impulse, Captain, that sort of thing.
So, in a way, it just floats into the direction and then gets pulled in by the atmosphere.
What tends to happen is when it passes by Jupiter, it does a catapult.
Yeah, all right.
So the gravity of Jupiter will pull it in and just fling it right out. And it's kind of like just getting a push along. And there's lots of different technologies which are being discussed and experimented with. Like, everyone always wants to build solar wind probes because they look beautiful. They just look like something straight from science fiction. And that's the same reason we all want to build a space elevator, just because, we all watched Tomorrow's World and it was great.
Well, yes, yeah, and there's that optimism again.
Yeah, exactly.
There's that great optimism. Right, I think we've discussed that. I'm probably going to have you on for a future show just to discuss, even because there's so many avenues of that. So I do apologise if we haven't, to the listeners out there, discussed maybe something, a little bit deeper. But it's just such a wide subject, really.
I also apologise if I'm wrong with anything. It's happened before. Just like, this is how it's done. Just tweet. No, it's not. No.
Well, yeah, I'm going to have to use that method. So that is the end of the first round there. Let's move on to the second round. It's called the You Tell Me round. I'll give you 15 seconds to talk about a specific subject. If once those 15 seconds have ended, I think you can talk about it in further detail, I'll give you another 15 seconds. Is that clear?
It is. I'm going to key into all my improv training and then probably panic and screw it up. So, all is well.
Okay, well, we'll kick off with the subject, The Big Bang Theory, starting from now.
It's a god-awful TV show. It is the worst TV show to ever grace our screens. Now, its only real saving grace is it's got the Bare Naked Ladies doing the theme song, because the Bare Naked Ladies are great. Like, the second favourite band of the entire Science Bitch podcast. We all have different first bands, but Bare Naked Ladies is all of our second favourite bands. But no, it's just, I like to refer to it as Nerd Blackface, which is the Nerd Minstrel Show, which is when it's basically a ton of very successful actors who are doing very well, kind of pretending to be geeks for laughs. And it's very similar to the jazz singer in how a white man would dress up as a black man to do show tunes, and it's offensive to my people, and I demand a boycott of the Big Bang Theory, and you should all turn off E4, go to Comedy Central, watch Friends instead. It's still crap, but it's a little bit better. That
is the most random. Do you know what? It doesn't matter how many episodes we do of this. That's the most random comparison I've ever heard. Big Bang Theory and the jazz singer.
Yeah, Nerd Blackface, man. It's a thing. It's that whole thing of, and it's very common in pop culture, of people going by tropes and going by stereotypes in a way to get laughs, because the Big Bang Theory is a show whose target audience are not who they are portraying.
Yeah, I can understand that. Let's see. So the next subject I will give you, and I'll give you 30 seconds on this one because you spoke quite beautifully on that. Let's see. So I'm going to give you the subject of a telescope. That is a telescope starting from now.
Telescopes aren't all the cracked up to be. That's my opinion on telescopes. Like, they're great, but you've got the Hubble telescope in space. Takes the most beautiful images of galaxies far, far away. Can't even really get a clear picture of Pluto or any of the distant planets. There's not enough light or something, despite the fact it's enormous. And that makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, kids to make telescopes with, like, little cardboard tubes. Like, not as good telescopes, but, I mean, they're great, but I think there's enough telescopes now. Right? There's too many telescopes. I think we have way up to 1 million on Earth. That's a number I pulled out my arse. I'm terribly sorry. But no, telescope, not all they're cracked up to be. They've done their job.
That's all right. I mean, Futurama had its say on it, didn't it? When they
the smelloscope, that's the future.
Well, no, I was really referring to the moment when they blew up the Hubble telescope, thinking it was an enemy spaceship.
That's an excellent point. I always remember the smell stone because I just remember thinking that's a great idea. And then I came up with the idea of the hearoscope, which is a telescope that hears, and realized that has definitely already been invented, and it's called sonar. So,
Well, I mean, that's called piracy, really.
oh, very true. Yeah, that's a radio.
Well, yeah, because people could just point it at someone's window and hear what they're listening to.
Yeah, but telescopes are just piracy for the eyes.
I mean, but somebody's just gonna figure out how to connect an auxiliary jack into the thing, and then copy whatever's onto an MP3 player or something.
Well, you can pop those jacks into telescopes as well. It's how we get video footage. Not very good video footage usually, but video footage of the sky at night. So by that theory, you could just point it at your neighbour's window, pop in a jack, and record a really terrible episode of The Big Bang Theory onto your TV.
Yeah, I think we're going to divert our attention away from that for a moment and move on to round 3, which is the I don't know what's coming here, the What's on Your Mind round, where I ask you, what is on your mind, Thom Bee?
I think Shakespeare. Well, living in Berlin, you get you become really aware of how English you are. Like, I have never considered myself to be quintessentially English, but every German I run into identifies it before I open my mouth. And when I do, sometimes they think I'm Danish, which is weird. So I started thinking about, because I'm trying to write a stand-up set at the moment, because the English comedy scene in Berlin is incredible. And I just kind of have a little spider diagram in my book of just things that are British. And Shakespeare always comes up. And I think it's because Shakespeare is the most quintessentially British thing in the world.
Yeah.
In Britain, I mean, in the world, maybe not, but the Queen is to the world. Shakespeare is to us.
Yeah.
But most kids hate it, and I blame our education system for that. Because when I was learning Shakespeare in school, we didn't see it, we didn't experience it, we would instead read it, and we would read it as a group, which means you would have just like this one guy in the back who could barely read, just going, "Oh, Romeo, wherefore art thou?" And it was dreadful. And to read Shakespeare in a monotonous tone, we used to get in trouble for singing the songs because we were having too much fun. I can only imagine. And it's the equivalent of teaching dance by just opening a pamphlet of Swan Lake and just going bouncy, 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 pirouette, bouncy, 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 all together, bouncy. Are you doing it, Tom? You can't do it. And it's bollocks, basically. So yeah, Shakespeare is what's on my mind. I wasn't expecting that. I think just because I was trying to write a set on a train.
Well, I mean, I guess that does come. I mean, I've been on several trips to even different counties, and you don't sort of realise how from a certain place you are until you go somewhere that's completely different.
No, certainly not. Like where I'm from, which is Rochdale, just about 12 miles north of Manchester, my accent is often thought to be very posh. I teach, I'm a circus teacher. I teach children for a living, and kids from my area think I'm American, Scottish, Irish. One child thought I was from Narnia, which was possibly the group, just because she couldn't identify my accent. But when I go down south, and I went to university to study film in Falmouth and in Cornwall, and I lived in London to work for 7 months. Apparently, I sound like a bloody mill worker. It's just people do your accents. Like, I mean, I shouldn't have been wearing a flat cap and growing out my beard at the time, but they just really just hone in on this apparently rough around the edges accent that I have, which I just want to take them to Rochdale and just sit them in the train station for half an hour and just go, no, this is what my people sound like. Like, to them, I sound like you.
Yeah.
And then whenever I tell them that, they get really offended.
Well, I mean, I guess it comes back to that Shakespeare thing again, isn't it, of what is quintessentially British, and of course, whenever you think of a Shakespearean play being said, it's said in that very kind of BBC meets English, Queen's English thing. Yeah. So, therefore, when you go and you have an accent, it comes out a lot more, and I suppose they then think that you're not from England because they expect everybody to speak their Queen's English.
Very true. Although, as I said earlier, the Germans are the best at identifying that I'm British. I think it's just my German's not very good, because I can say the words and I can speak the sentences and sometimes get the verbs in the right order, but my accent is not German when I speak German. But I consider the things quintessentially British. The things that I can't buy here and I didn't realize I would miss until I couldn't have them every day. Which is PG Tips, crumpets, Marmite, and pickled onion Monster Munch.
Wait a minute. The most British thing. You can't get Marmite. No, sorry. You can't get PG Tips in Germany.
Well, there's like there's a great little place in Kreuzberg called Broken English, but I refuse to go in there because now that I can't have it, I like to see it as a treat. When I last went home, I was sent back with 36 crumpets, a tub of Marmite, and a box of 120 PG Tips, and very happy with that.
The thing is, once again, you've proved yourself to be quintessentially English by wanting tea and crumpets.
Of course I want tea and crumpets. It's the best way to start your day. And no one here likes Marmite, which means even more for me. Except for one Slovakian guy I work with, which is cool. He wants me to bring back a vat of it, apparently.
Well, there you are. And with that, we now know what's on your mind. Quite a lot. And we'll end the programme there, but I'd like to say thank you very much for joining me today, and good luck with the circus teaching and the podcast as well. Definitely go and check that out.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I do not get to rant about the Big Bang Theory into a microphone enough. Not true. We did it in like episode 3, but it was a different skip. But no, thank you for having me. It has honestly been an absolute pleasure, and really enjoyed it. And for It's Science Bitch Stuff, I've been told I have to plug. For It's Science Bitch Stuff, you can follow us on Twitter at Binary Womb. Website's on the way. Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, all the places you find podcasts.
Well, there we are, and thank you very much. And of course, we now have a new Facebook page for the week before as well. So if you're listening here, then you can also like that while you're looking up It's Science Bitch as well. Right, from me, Jamie Dyer, I bid you farewell, and we'll see you on the next edition of The Week Before.
You've been listening to The Week Before, a weekly recorded show presented by Jamie Dyer, with this week's special guest. The announcer was Katie Harvey, and this has been an all-age media production. Thank you for listening.